From A&E, this is Biography. For July 24th, 2000, Biography with Harry Smith.
All he wanted to be was an actor. Along the way, Harrison Ford became one of the greatest stars Hollywood has ever known. When Harrison Ford gets that cockeyed grin, we smile. When he gets in trouble, we squirm in our seats. And when he beats the bad guys, we stand up and cheer. Harrison Ford received the American Film Institute's Lifetime Achievement Award earlier this year because his resume includes some of history's most popular films. His latest is the supernatural thriller, What Lies Beneath, which opened on Friday. It's a film full of surprises, but what comes as no surprise is the enduring success of Harrison Ford.
Harrison is definitely one of the major movie stars of the latter half of the 20th century.
Look, I don't have all day to hang out here and discuss your sex life.
You know, Harrison's like a blue-collar worker, you know, who can take on many different hats in the different roles he plays. He's the people's actor, the people's movie star. They love him in that regard.
I'm the President of the United States.
I don't know if you would find a woman in this country that wouldn't say she'd like to be in the company of Harrison Ford.
He's one of the most popular and highest paid actors in the world. He has spent 3 decades crafting characters so indelible they have become part of the American lexicon.
Indiana Jones.
Han Solo.
He represents the heroic figure that's central to the American myth.
Yet he has remained an enigma.
I have never felt personally responsible for the success of the Star Wars films or the Indiana Jones films, or for that matter, any other successful film.
Fiercely independent, intensely private, frequently moody and temperamental, Harrison Ford would seem an unlikely candidate for stardom.
He wasn't the exact mold of the leading man. He didn't look the way that he was supposed to look.
But he has reached the pinnacle of his profession on his own terms. It was a time of war, a time for courage, and America was searching for heroes in the field of battle and in the imaginations of millions. While Gary Cooper, Spencer Tracy, and Clark Gable filled movie screens with their larger-than-life presence, on July 13th, 1942, in Chicago, a new movie hero was born. His name was Harrison Ford. His father, Christopher Ford, was a 35-year-old divorcee who made his living as a writer. His 24-year-old mother, Dorothy, enjoyed acting in radio dramas. Dorothy was Jewish. Christopher was Irish Catholic, and in those days, mixed marriages were rare. But in 1946, when Harrison's little brother Terrence was born, the Fords took advantage of their multi-ethnic heritage and introduced the boys to Chicago's cultural melting pot.
Harrison was taken to a variety of religious places, Catholic churches, Protestant churches, Jewish synagogues. And it was all part of encouraging Harrison to have an open mind and to be open to all possibilities.
In 1955, Ford was attending Meltzer Junior High, and his unusual upbringing was not always appreciated by his peers. That, coupled with his shyness, made mixing with friends difficult, and he became the target of schoolyard bullies.
Harrison was the fish out of water. They used to throw him down the slopes outside the school. He wouldn't do anything. He'd just pick himself up, climb back up again. They'd throw him back down again.
2 years later, when 15-year-old Harrison was enrolled in Maine Township High School, he concealed his insecurities by becoming the class clown, and he reached out to classmates by drawing freehand sketches for school election posters. But as Harrison yearned for acceptance, he was distracted from his studies. His academic performance suffered, and as a result, he felt overwhelmed by his father's success. Christopher had become a prosperous advertising executive and soon moved the family to the conservative, upscale neighborhood of Park Ridge. Harrison's grades remained poor throughout high school, and it took the influence of a benevolent guidance counselor to get him into college. In 1960, Ford entered Ripon College, a small liberal arts school in Wisconsin. And while he relished the opportunity to expand his horizons, the new environment brought out a rebellious streak in the young man.
He had to wear a jacket and tie to dinner each night. He had to do military training on Monday afternoons. He hated all that regimentation.
The young outsider found acceptance in Sigma Nu, where he and fraternity brother Bill Halgem formed a band.
Folk music was big in those days, and we created the Brothers Gross. We were in high demand at beer blasts, which was the major activity on weekends at Ripon College.
The lively and probing discussions in Harrison's philosophy class also captured his attention, and he glowed in the praise of appreciative professors. Unfortunately, Ford never got around to writing all of his term papers. Realizing he was not equal to the task, and knowing he had failed to meet the academic standards his father had set for him, Harrison spiraled into a destructive depression. He sought escape by switching his focus to the drama department, and here he finally blossomed. The thrill of being someone else swept away the insecurities that had plagued him, and soon Ford surprised everyone, including himself, when he demonstrated a natural talent for the theater.
He played Mac the Knife at Three Penny Opera. I mean, he was brilliant. I mean, the rest of everybody were just kind of walking around. Harry had this magnetism.
For a long time, he'd been overshadowed by his father and his father's success. Here, at last, was an opportunity for him to assert himself and to shine.
Encouraged by his success and stimulated by the wordplay of great dramatists like Tennessee Williams and Bertolt Brecht, the young man decided to make acting his full-time career. But Harrison was impulsive and impatient, and in June of 1964, one class short of the number of credits he needed to graduate, he dropped out of college. Ford also stunned friends and family by announcing his engagement to a pretty co-ed named Mary Marquardt, who shared his love of the theater.
My prospective in-laws who wanted to know what I was going to do for a living, and I said, well, I'm going to be an actor. They were a little shocked. My parents, I think, supported my ambitions. I don't think anybody had very much hope for them, but I was supported.
Luckily, Ford had a lead on an acting job at the nearby Belfry Theater, where artistic director Bill Fusick, a former mentor to Paul Newman, felt Harrison had potential.
Bill Fusick saw a slightly dangerous, slightly interesting side to Harrison. He was very handsome as well, and he took a shot on him.
Fusick's hunch paid off in the summer of 1964, when the 21-year-old Ford earned himself the coveted place of resident actor. With Mary by his side as rehearsal partner, set painter, and soulmate, Harrison began to build his acting resume, commanding leading roles in the great dramas and musicals of the day. By the time the couple was married in June, Harrison was convinced he had a future in acting. The question was whether to head east to Broadway or west to Hollywood.
Bill Fusick was very helpful, and he offered to put us up, my wife and I, when we first went to California. We spent a couple of months living in his spare bedroom while I looked for a part-time job.
In 1964, when Ford arrived in Hollywood, the movie colony was the very soul of fun and frivolity, and the serious young actor had a difficult time fitting in. But while he was appearing at the Laguna Playhouse in John Brown's Body, a dramatic Civil War play, Harrison Ford was noticed. Critics called him the best young actor in the area. And a talent scout for Columbia Pictures quickly signed the 22-year-old prospect. The studio instantly began molding Harrison's image, and like other young actors in the new talent program, he was given a daily regimen to follow.
Columbia Pictures in the new talent program, where one was expected to show up every day in a jacket and tie, to take acting classes, to submit to publicity opportunities wherever they came from, and to generally be under the control of the studio.
In In early 1966, the 23-year-old Harrison won his first Columbia assignment, a walk-on role in the James Coburn vehicle Dead Heat on a Merry-Go-Round.
Paging Mr. Ellis. Paging Mr. Ellis.
Boy? Bob Ellis? Robert Ellis, room 72.
No, sir. Charles Ellis. Room 607.
You sure?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Paging Mr. Ellis.
But when one executive critiqued Harrison's performance, it was a lesson in humility for the young actor.
He called me and he said, "You're never going to make it in this business." And I said, "Oh, you know what?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you the story. Tony Curtis delivered a bag of groceries in his first movie. You took one look at him and you said, 'That's a movie star.'" And I leaned across the desk and I said, "I thought you were supposed to think that that was a grocery delivery boy." And of course, he threw me right out of his office.
Not surprisingly, Harrison's tenure with Columbia Studios was brief. By the end of 1966, the United States was deeply involved in the Vietnam War. But Harrison, required by Uncle Sam to register for the draft, had been exempted from service.
I applied for conscientious objector status during the Vietnam War. I was unable to find a moral justification for being part of it. My wife became pregnant with Ben, our son. My status was changed to that of a father, and we weren't being called at that time.
While the new father did not have to go to war, he was in desperate need of a paycheck. Fortunately, a talent scout named Walter Beekle recommended Ford for another new talent program, this time at Universal Studios. Westerns were a mainstay on the Universal lot, and the 24-year-old actor who had cut his teeth on the great works of contemporary drama was asked to saddle up and pretend to be a cowpoke on shows like The Virginian.
You shut up. No offense. We rob and steal because we don't have a rich granddad to pay for it. We kill because somebody sticks a knife in our ribs. Napkin ring. I'm sorry.
When I look at the early TV stuff, some of it's bloody awful. I hadn't found a way of discovering what it is that I should be doing. And often I couldn't get the answers to the questions or couldn't change anything enough to make it comfortable for me.
Not only was Ford awkward in front of the cameras, he was also disinclined to play the Hollywood game. But while he challenged directors and pursued bigger roles, he gained the reputation of being difficult.
Harrison found Hollywood deeply frustrating. As the rejections piled up, he became a more and more difficult character to live with. His wife Mary would ring friends up and ask fellow actors to come across and talk to Harrison to try and encourage him, to reassure him that one day he would make it.
Yet even when given the opportunity to meet successful casting director Fred Roos, Harrison was surly and sarcastic. Nonetheless, the Hollywood insider saw something beneath the surface.
He didn't come on in any kind of phony, friendly, trying to please way. Harrison wouldn't give an inch that way. He would be exactly himself. But we warmed to each other. I think we talked for an hour, hour and a half.
Roos had a hard time selling his moody new protege, and Harrison grew increasingly despondent. He channeled his restless energy by learning carpentry, working first on his own home before tackling projects for hire. Harrison boldly bid on and won a job to build a $100,000 studio for Brazilian recording artist Sergio Mendes. After checking an armload of books out of the Encino Tarzana Public Library, Ford wielded a hammer in one hand and a how-to guide in the other and set to work.
By concentrating on making a roof, in a way, it was his way of regaining self-respect.
Harrison Ford had become a name to be reckoned with in Hollywood. Yet, despite his ambitions, he was known around town as a master carpenter, not as an actor whose talents were in demand. But all of that was about to change.
You are watching Harrison Ford on Biography. On Biography.
special one and jump into your candy-colored custom or your screaming machine, cruise downtown and catch American Graffiti. It's one of those great old movies about romance, racing, and rock and roll.
It was 1973, and American Graffiti was the hot new summer movie. A love letter to a simpler, gentler time, the nostalgic tale of fast cars and faster women, was the creation of George Lucas, a protege of Francis Ford Coppola. It starred Richard Dreyfuss, Cindy Williams, and Ron Howard. Among the cast was Harrison Ford, who at the age of 31 was featured in the role of bad boy Bob Falfa.
Hey, dog, why don't you come on a ride with me in about 10 years? Now, leave her out of this. This is just between you and me.
Harrison would make suggestions, as a lot of the actors would make suggestions. You know, Harrison wanted to wear a cowboy hat, so I let him wear a cowboy hat. There's always a collaboration that goes on between the actor and the director.
The film's collaborative spirit inspired Harrison to throw himself into acting as never before. And he carried his enthusiasm off the set when he joined his co-star Paul Le Mat for some after-hours mischief.
Harrison and I hung out together on our days off. He sort of tricked me into going to the bars and drinking against my will, but I wanted him to feel good. I wanted to make him feel comfortable, so I went along with it.
They drank a lot of beer and threw beer bottles out their motel window and cracked a Cadillac's windshield. And every day we would all talk about what they had done the night before. Did you hear what Harrison and Paul did?
The popularity of American Graffiti launched the careers of several of its young actors. But it did little to enhance Ford's status in Hollywood. Dejected, he returned to making the rounds of auditions without much success.
People didn't want to hire him back in those days. One thing I know he told me when he went on meetings, he wouldn't say anything. He would just sit in the room and kind of stare at the floor, which didn't help.
Supporting roles in 2 more Francis Ford Coppola films at least helped Harrison put food on the table. But by 1974, the Ford family included a second son named Willard, and as paychecks grew scarce, Harrison gave free rein to his moody temperament, a destructive habit that put a strain on his marriage. 2 years later, however, American Graffiti's director, George Lucas, was searching for an actor to play an intergalactic smuggler in his sprawling space epic titled Star Wars. Casting director Fred Roos urged Lucas to consider Harrison Ford.
I had been pushing George about Harrison, because I thought he was on the money, right, for that part. He had a great sense of humor, a great sense of comedy.
In a clever ploy, Roos hired Ford not as an actor, but as a carpenter, to install an elaborate door at American Zoetrope Studios, which was adjacent to where Lucas was holding auditions.
He was working on the door, and Fred had been pushing me to use Harrison. But I had in the back of my mind that he was a candidate. But once we started doing the testing, there was no question that he was the one.
Ford won the role of Han Solo and joined 2 other relative newcomers in the cast. Mark Hamill played the youthful hero, Luke Skywalker, and Carrie Fisher played the rebel Princess Leia. And together, they would battle the evil Empire. While filming at London's Elstree Studios, Harrison was stimulated by the lively production team.
Okay, cut. Got it. And.
The mic was in frame. The mic was in picture.
Oh.
The mic was in picture.
The mic was in picture.
Go back to first position.
The sound department has to pay up. Harrison is a kind of scruffy, independent soul, and that's what Han Solo is. So, in a way, there was a perfect matchup there in terms of their personalities.
Yes, Greedo. As a matter of fact, I was just going to see your boss. Tell Jabba that I've got his money.
So, píchale.
Yeah, but this time I've got the money. I don't have it with me. My dead body.
Bet you have.
Sorry about the mess.
Ford had never before been involved in a film of such complexity. He and Lucas choreographed scenes which would later be seamlessly blended with special effects. In May of 1977, Star Wars was released and quickly became a global phenomenon. The film grossed $100 million in just 3 months, faster than any motion picture in history. And its success put Harrison Ford on solid financial ground for the first time in his career.
When Star Wars was successful, things became more manageable, money-wise at least.
Flying high on Star Wars' enormous popularity, in 1977, Ford appeared in Heroes with Henry Winkler, and the next year in Force 10 from Navarone with Robert Shaw. In 1979, 37-year-old Harrison was cast in his first leading role. Hanover Street was a sizzling and sensual World War II romance, co-starring the lovely Leslie Ann Down. But audiences found that Hanover Street was a bigger bomb than any that fell on Britain during the Blitz. And Ford began to fear that the Star Wars Force would always be with him. Adoring fans would only see him as Han Solo.
Because there were 2 or 3 movies that he did after Star Wars, which weren't big hits. He was kind of written off as a fluke. I can only do one kind of character.
On top of his career difficulties, Ford had trouble on the home front. He had spent months on location abroad, and the time away from home, coupled with persistent rumors of romantic dalliances, had finally taken their toll on the Fords' marriage. By the end of 1979, Harrison and Mary had separated amicably, but the wounds were lasting. Crushed by the dissolution of his marriage and stung by the failure of his latest film, Harrison struggled to put his life back together. He left Mary and the boys in the house he had renovated and took up residence nearby to be close to his children. But despite these personal setbacks, Harrison Ford's greatest career triumph lay ahead. He was about to become a movie star.
You are watching Harrison Ford on Biography.
Set 271.
What are you doing? You're not actually going into an asteroid field.
They'd be crazy to follow us, wouldn't they?
Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
In 1980, The Empire Strikes Back reunited Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo. It was another box office smash, taking in $365 million worldwide. Flush with success, producer George Lucas began developing his next big-budget project. Directed by Steven Spielberg, the movie would star Tom Selleck in the role of Indiana Smith, whose name was later changed to Jones. But when Selleck was committed to star in a CBS television series called Magnum P.I., Lucas and Spielberg turned to Harrison Ford.
understands audiences very, very well. And I think he saw this picture, and he was one of the few people who got the concept of Raiders as a throwback to the old serials from the 1930s and 40s.
As timely as tomorrow's headlines, the thrilling story of fearless United Nations secret agents matching wits with treacherous Nazi spies.
Guten Tag. Müde? Warum schläfst du? Wo ist dein Hemd? Wasch dich mal, damit du nicht aussiehst wie ein Schwein bei deinem Standgericht. Steh auf!
The film required stunts more difficult than Ford had ever attempted, but he insisted on doing many of them himself.
He did more stunt work as a leading actor than any other leading actor I've ever worked with in my career.
During a climactic scene involving a flying wing aircraft, Harrison severed a ligament in his right knee, but kept on shooting. And yet Spielberg soon discovered that the stoic actor did have one weakness.
I mean, he'll fight, he'll roll in the dirt, he'll fall off things, but when you get him wet, he's a little bit like when you get a cat wet. You know, he doesn't say, I don't want to get wet, or I protest the liquid of the shot. Never does that. But you can just tell that his mood gets a little darker, but I always see a cloud moving over his face when we bring out the big water hoses to drench him.
But when heat and dehydration made it seem wise to cut one scene short, Harrison suggested that Indiana shoot first and ask questions later.
We had this big sword fight, and it was going to take all day to shoot it. Harrison went to Stephen and said, you know, if this were real, I would just pull out my gun and shoot the guy.
The guy had been practicing with the sword for months. He was told he would swing the sword once and then get shot. He was appalled. So I pulled the trigger before he had a chance to even think about it, and he fell down. And that's the shot we used.
In Raiders, Harrison Ford had created a larger-than-life hero who was also vulnerable.
He suggested to myself and George, I don't want to be this movie star that by the end of this amazing adventure, after 19 cliffhangers, I have just a tiny little scar over my right eyebrow and I have a little dirt on my face. We had a lot of fun in the scene where he is really racked with pain, and he had a wonderful line that Harrison made this line up himself.
Not the man I knew 10 years ago.
It's not the years, it's the mileage.
He gives the audience permission to be Indiana Jones just by virtue of showing pain and showing fear and showing the fact that he's a mortal character.
When Raiders of the Lost Ark was released in 1981, it had astonishing longevity, taking in more than $335 million worldwide. Harrison Ford had finally become a movie star. He was now in a position to take risks, as he did in 1982 when he appeared in the dark science fiction thriller Blade Runner, opposite Sean Young. Off-screen, the 40-year-old actor had a new leading lady. 31-year-old Melissa Matheson was a successful screenwriter whose credits included The Black Stallion for producer Francis Ford Coppola and the Spielberg blockbuster E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Melissa was an intelligent and independent woman, a Hollywood insider, and many felt she was the perfect match for Harrison Ford. In 1983, they were married in a private ceremony in Santa Monica, California.
They hit it off immediately. She had a very acerbic, a very questioning mentality. In Harrison, she found a real soulmate.
When Ford traveled to England to shoot The Return of the Jedi, the final installment of the Star Wars trilogy, he brought with him a maturity born of experience and the confidence to reshape his audience's definition of a movie hero.
Harrison's one of the few actors that's thought of and perceived of as a strong male role model who will cry in his movies.
Just relax for a moment. You're free as a carbonite.
Who are you?
Someone who loves you.
Where?
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was Ford's next project, and while he was now among the world's most popular action heroes, the 42-year-old star had yet to prove himself as a leading actor in a straight dramatic role. But he would soon have his chance in a film that would bring him more acclaim than he could ever have imagined.
Biography's look at Harrison Ford will continue. But first, do you know the answer to tonight's bio trivia? Harrison Ford was banned from entering Tibet because of which controversial film written by his wife, Melissa Matheson? Log on to biography.com for the answer and take our weekly quiz for a chance to win a biography video.
In February of 1985, 42-year-old Harrison Ford had abandoned swashbuckling in spaceships and transformed himself into a Philadelphia police detective named John Book. Co-starring Kelly McGillis and Lucas Haas, Witness told the story of an Amish family on the run from inner-city crime. It also offered Ford a chance to prove that he could be something more than a big-screen action hero.
How's he doing? What's your name?
Samuel Lott.
Sam. The man who was killed tonight was a policeman. It's my job to find out what happened. The man that you saw, he was a big guy? Like me?
Big guy.
In Witness, I was blown away by Harrison's interaction with the young boy. The whole gentle side of Harrison, the patient side of Harrison, a whole other color I had never seen before. I thought the love scenes in Witness were amazing. He was able to do things in that picture. He was a much more complete human being in Witness than the character or the scripts allowed him to be in any of his prior work.
Ford opened himself up to audiences as he never had before. And when Oscar time came around, he was rewarded with a nomination for Best Actor of 1985. William Hurt won that year for Kiss of the Spider-Woman, but Harrison enjoyed a personal triumph.
He proved that he could be in a movie, that he could carry it all by himself, that it didn't have either Steve or I directing it, but it'd be a huge success just with his name on it.
Now 43, Harrison had the freedom to make choices many actors only dream of, all the while delving into his own complex nature.
There's the introverted Harrison Ford, but there's also the expressive, sort of very outspoken Harrison Ford. And I think these two things work together quite well. I think that's the secret in many ways of his success.
Over the next 2 years, Ford brought audiences an ambitious array of roles. A father gone mad in Mosquito Coast, a husband pursuing his wife's kidnappers in Frantic, and a corporate raider with Melanie Griffith on his mind in Working Girl.
Mr. Jack Trainer to see you, Miss McGill.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Hold all calls, Miss McGill.
Yes, Cynthia, thank you.
Can I get you anything, Mr. Trainer? Coffee, tea, me?
Isn't she a riot? That'll be all, Cynthia. Why did you say you weren't you last night?
Because I knew what would happen. All mergers and acquisitions. No lust and tequila.
What did happen exactly?
Nothing happened. Nothing happened.
I woke up in my underwear.
I'll bet you look nice.
By 1989, the undying popularity of Ford's character, Indiana Jones, had made the 47-year-old actor an American icon. And for the third installment of the series, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Sean Connery had been tapped to play Indy's father.
I had always wanted to do a father-son story with Indy. I'd always wondered who could his father be. And of course, his father had to be Sean Connery. I mean, nobody else could be the father of Indiana Jones except James Bond.
2 days after the movie opened, Harrison Ford was on hand to make Indiana Jones's signature hat and jacket a part of the Smithsonian's permanent collection.
I could try the hat on one last time. Please.
But despite his superstar status, Harrison believed that fame wasn't as important as his need to continually challenge himself as an actor. And he began the next decade with a gallery of memorable film portrayals. In 1990, audiences thrilled to the tough moral choices faced by prosecutor Rusty Savage in Presumed Innocent. Harrison also stretched himself to play the mentally challenged Henry Turner in Regarding Henry. Ford was both action hero and family man in 1992 when he became CIA agent Jack Ryan in Tom Clancy's blockbuster Patriot Games opposite Ann Archer.
Down! Get down! Get down!
Harrison's very professional. He knows what works for himself. By the time the camera rolls, the character's inside of him, and he knows who that guy is. He knows everything about him.
Did I miss something?
I'm pregnant.
Honey.
If you look at leading men, they have this simple, sort of real, very there quality. The camera captures that, and you can't take your eyes off of him.
He's got great eyes. He can say a lot with his eyes. You can rip pages out of the script and cut the dialogue, and he'll still get the emotion across. One good example of that was a scene in Patriot Games where the CIA and the Air Force are making an attack on a terrorist camp in the Mideast, and they're watching it on satellite.
That is a kill.
His instincts are so accurate as to what he does best that we ended up with a scene that worked out wonderfully and was an example of less is more.
In 1993, Ford brought new complexity to the character of Dr. Richard Kimball in The Fugitive, a movie based on the popular television series. And 1 year later, found success again as Jack Ryan, this time in Clear and Present Danger. After 28 years in films, Ford was right where he wanted to be, at the top of his profession and having arrived there on his own terms.
You know, Harrison's not a really handsome kind of leading man. He's a more rugged, realistic, natural-looking leading man. I would sort of equate him to a modern-day Clark Gable.
I always thought that he was a strong reminder, for me, of Humphrey Bogart, a very young version of Humphrey Bogart.
A master craftsman, Ford now approached acting as he once tackled carpentry, building enduring performances that quickly became the standard by which others would be measured.
I do love language and the play of language and well-written dialogue. I look for what kernel of information each scene has that can progress the story. And then I look for behavior which will make that interesting, that kernel of information hopefully interesting to receive.
In 1996, the 54-year-old actor, confident in his career and comfortable in his personal life, was now able to poke a little fun at his public persona. On February 20th, he endured the traditional Harvard University hazing, donning a Medusa wig and a bra to become the Hasty Pudding Theatricals Man of the Year. Having made his mark on the movies, Harrison could relax and enjoy his success. And it seemed that only one challenge remained for the star of the world's most popular films. Harrison Ford would have to top himself.
You are watching Harrison Ford on Biography.
In 1997, 55-year-old Harrison Ford was at the top of his game, a Hollywood power player of the highest order, and he was now able to command a $20 million salary to get on board Air Force One.
Go on, блядь!
Hey, what more can make people do? Tell the F-15s to fire at the plane?
The computer flies circles around any missile they fire at us. No hit, just a shockwave.
He's telling us what to do.
Believe me, all that'd happen is we'd get knocked off our feet. That's all.
The suspense thriller featured Ford as a kidnapped U.S. president battling a terrorist, played by Gary Oldman, who would stop at nothing to destroy the American way of life. The film's success was dazzling even by Harrison Ford standards, bringing in an astronomical $37 million in its first weekend. But after 10 years of playing businessmen, CIA agents, and lawyers, in 1998, Ford was willing to lose the suit and tie and jump into a richly comic portrayal of a crusty aviator in 6 Days, 7 Nights.
I'm sorry.
You're kissing me?
No, for this.
Harrison Ford.
I really liked kissing you.
And Heesh.
If I start, I'm not going to be able to stop.
That's good.
Doesn't it?
Some sort of creature has just swum up my pants.
That's bad.
Although the rigors of movie making continued to hold their appeal for Ford, he took time out to reap the rewards of his lucrative career, buying a small fleet of planes for his personal enjoyment. Harrison's passion for flying was a good fit for a man who had always balanced freedom with discipline.
I'd be quite happy to do it for a living. I like to be challenged by learning new things. I like the machines, and maybe it has something to do with control. But it also has to do with a potential for being humbled by it at any minute. So you really have to pay attention to what you're doing.
Near the close of the 20th century, Harrison Ford had proven himself a star for the ages. He brought a refreshing informality to his role as a movie icon. And as husband and father, he had learned well the difficult lessons of his youth. Harrison was happy in a stable marriage. His family grew to include a son, Malcolm, and a daughter, Georgia. And in 1996, his older son, Willard, made him a grandfather. Ford's interests also turned to philanthropic works, such as joining his wife, Melissa, in her support of Tibetan human rights. And his life of privilege permitted him to enjoy his privacy on an 800-acre ranch in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Harrison lives his life in the most normal way of many of my friends who were relatively obsessed with filmmaking. Harrison spends most of his time not thinking about films or scripts or what he should do next. He spends most of his time with his family, living in Wyoming. He's probably more normal than any of us.
During his journey across the world's movie screens, Harrison Ford has evolved from a wisecracking space cowboy to the essential American actor. His economy and grace are rivaled only by his willingness to probe to the very heart of what it means to be a hero.
The big secret of Harrison Ford's life that not many people know about, it's that in order to keep his fedora on as Indiana Jones, he uses a staple gun, and he has to staple it to his head. And that's how the hat doesn't fly off in every scene. George will kill me for saying this, and so will Harrison, but that's how he does it.
I never heard him talk about being a star. He just wanted to be a working actor.
He's very interested in being real, and well, you can see that by where he lives and the kind of life he has when he's not filming.
I never had movie heroes or people in the entertainment world were never heroes to me. You only work as part of a team and use your best efforts. I hope that I've learned something from that experience.
His new film, What Lies Beneath, is playing in theaters around the country. But what lies ahead for Harrison Ford? The Hollywood Reporter says one project he won't be doing is a reprise of his Jack Ryan character from Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games. But there is another role that Ford, who just turned 58, would like to revisit. another adventure as Indiana Jones. Tomorrow on Biography, he's one of the most popular actors ever on the small screen. But there's more to the multi-talented Alan Alda than just Hawkeye Pierce. That's Alan Alda, Tuesday. For Biography, I'm Harry Smith. Thanks for watching.
Biography, brought to you in part by Nissan.